in great leaps and bounds. The new 5-year plan that has been adopted now speaks specifically to the notion of ecological civilization. We have also seen that, for instance, when we are living well, the approach that countries, particularly also in South America, have taken as their orientation is informing this discussion of how do we make the relationship between environment, economy and society one that is not based on trade-offs so much, but rather on trying to make development happen on all the 3 dimensions for sustainable development. I'm also very pleased to see that Bhutan and its Gross National Happiness Index has been one of the experiences that we have seen. Good evening, sir, welcome. That in some ways almost pioneered the challenge to established paradigms of measuring progress. And as you know, when a magazine like The Economist begins to write repeatedly about an index such as gross national happiness, then even the most classical economic debate is taking note. Let's also remember that at Rio +20, the notion of moving beyond GDP became a call that heads of state and governments issued. And we have also seen since then, for instance, in the context of the European Union, the concept of the circular economy gaining momentum. Now, in Unep, we have tried to work on these different approaches under the heading of a transition towards an inclusive green economy. In some countries, the notion of a green economy is equated to an economically dominated paradigm, and I think it is always important that that was never the intention. On the contrary, what we wanted to challenge was the dominant paradigm of economics that is often invoked and link it to what is now a very natural logic emerging out of the 2030 agenda. But also the imperatives of trying to figure out how in the real world of a globalized economy, different economic models and decisions and outcomes such as the Paris Agreement, which calls for no less than a reinventing of our economies over the next 50 years, not only in the energy sector, but actually in the transport sector, in agriculture, in mobility, in infrastructure management. And so when in Unep we often use as a heading this notion of an inclusive green economy, it echoes to multiple approaches that are not in the first instance defined by a singular economic paradigm. But what we have tried to do over the years, and particularly in the original Green Economy report, was to study how are countries actually deploying public policy, how are they involving the actors in the economy, whether it is the small farmer, whether it is the corner shop, whether it is the food supply industry, whether it is the energy sector, in trying to make these transitions become possible. Because remember, one reason why we took relatively long to translate the science of climate change into an economic transformation agenda was to do with the fact that for many countries it seemed to be a threat to their economic well-being. It seemed also in the international context a set of very unequal departure points for countries on which to converge in a very short period of time their economic transformation. As we sit here today, I must say we have, I think, crossed a number of boundaries. First of all, that assumption that sustainability in its widest sense, but also the environment more specifically, will always have to be the price we pay for development is a myth that has been challenged head-on. Not only because of global warming, but also because of the loss of ecosystem services, the productive functions of our, what I would like to sometimes refer to as the ecological infrastructure, just to make it clear that our economies and our societies, our livelihoods are not only built around railways, power lines, buildings and highways, but in fact are built very much on an ecological infrastructure that provides us with the services that we, in economic terms, have treated as of no value for the better part of modern economic development. And that has led us also to the point where we destroy them because in economic terms very often it was of no consequence. I have my colleagues Fulai here also. we have known each other for the better part of 20 years when already we were trying to address the issue of systems of national accounting. Nature left invisible in a system of national accounting that determines how countries develop, invest, tax, and actually protect also resources will continue to lead us in the wrong direction. With you also being here, Madame Zhang, let me also say that what is currently being debated in the context of China is quite remarkable, because to have in a 5-year development plan not only the notion of ecological civilization being articulated as an objective in moving the development agenda in a very different trajectory for China's future development is in itself quite remarkable, because it has happened in a relatively short period of time. But let me also tell you that in our work with the People's Bank of China, where we cooperated for almost a year in 14 working groups to work with China and many of the experts in the Chinese financial economy to understand how would China be able to mobilize also its financial resources to essentially underwrite the investments that this transition towards a more sustainable and ecological civilization would entail, was a remarkable experience, because without finance, without investment, without resources, public and private, there is no hope whatsoever of either achieving the SDGs or indeed achieving the kinds of trajectories that the Paris Agreement laid out. By China's own estimates, and I've forgotten the exact figure now, annual green finance needs are estimated to be in the range of $200 billion, I think, as a first estimate. That is almost twice the entire ODA transfer investment payments that we see, for example, from north to south. It gives you an order of magnitude, and I'm sure the numbers will evolve over time, of what just one economy views as a current challenge in terms of not only setting goals, but then realizing them in the real world of investments, of choices that need to be made. So I would like to end my brief presentation by referring one more time to the notion of gross national happiness. I think the Kingdom of Bhutan still has an enormously important role to play in reminding ourselves that, economics can either be a suffocating discipline, because very often, as we have seen during the financial crisis, it can basically hold an entire society, economy to ransom. The notion of being too big to fail, or that there is no alternative, and that this is the law of physics equivalent in economic terms, has often imprisoned our public debate, but also our imagination, and above all our ability to conceive of an economy where people do not work to serve the economy, but the economy works to serve people. And by so doing, I think we have also managed, with a debate around green economy, ecological civilization, gross national happiness, circular economy, introduced the vital foundation of the future pathway for development. If it continues to be ignorant and blind to the centrality of maintaining the environmental foundations of our livelihoods, of our national economies, and ultimately of a global economy, then we are doomed to failure. And I think this is where hopefully the discussion this afternoon will offer us some very practical experiences and allow us to continue to evolve this debate, because it is far from having been either concluded or been conclusive. So with these opening remarks, again, thank you very much for the support. I wish you as panelists a very productive discussion. I will sneak back in as soon as our bureau meeting is over, and thank you for having me here with you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Steiner, although he's leaving now, and Excellencies, distinguished guests, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. So it's really my great pleasure to be here today on this high-level workshop. On behalf of Ministry of Environmental Protection of China and as a co-host of this event, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all of you here today. Thank you for being with us and discuss on the important issues of sustainable development. And I know that there are quite a lot of dynamic events happening tonight. And when you come here, you also sacrifice the parties outside. So this also shows that the topic today is really very interesting and important. Just as Mr. Steiner mentioned, in the year 2013, a Unep Governing Council decision acknowledged different pathways on sustainable development. In response to this decision, the Chinese government and Unep began working together to collect and share related information. The subsequent Unep report, Multiple Pathways to Sustainable Development, Initial Findings from the Global South, was published in the year 2015, provides examples of 4 countries' pathways to sustainable development. And then, in the following year, a UNEA resolution again emphasized the different approaches, visions, models, and tools to achieve environmental sustainability in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. Since then, Unep has collected information on 4 additional pathways towards a detailed report introducing China's ecological civilization approach. And these 2 new reports will be released this Thursday here at UNEA. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past year, the global discourse on sustainable development has reached a new height after the adoption of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, the SDGs, and also the Paris Agreement. The delivery of the bold and ambitious goals and targets in these global agreements requires countries around the world to work together and act on the mission set for us so that our future generations can have a decent life. There is an old Chinese saying, one key opens one lock. So different countries really have different development stages and environmental situation. They also face different environmental challenges and development priorities. This means that there is no one-size-fits-all model for sustainable development, and the country has to choose the most appropriate pathways that meet their own particular circumstances. In China, ecological civilization, as our pathway to sustainable development, is receiving unprecedented attention from governments at all levels and the public at large. With the past economic growth in the past 3 decades, we have also paid a heavy environmental price. To address the dilemmas between the economic development and environmental constraints, we are finally pursuing a development that is socially inclusive and environmentally friendly. Since 2007, China has devoted great efforts in developing the ecological civilization approach and established it as a long-term strategy vital to China's modernization and our people's well-being. And in 2012, our government has also incorporated eco-civilization into a 5-in-1 blueprint, which means a resource-saving, environmentally society that seeks to integrate ecological development with economic and social development. And since then, mission and vision of ecological civilization have been set and concrete actions have been taken. I may give you some figures just to demonstrate the results of building the ecological civilization in China. Actually, by the end of 2014, China had built 10.5 billion square meters of energy-saving buildings in urban areas, and that is roughly about 38% of the total area of urban residential buildings. And China also has set up the largest air quality monitoring network in the developing countries. We have now about 338 cities which have the monitoring stations and the capacity to monitor PM 2.5 and other 6 air quality indicators. And by the end of 2015, We also became one of the countries with the largest sewage treatment plant capacity in the world, with the urban sewage treatment rate reaching to about 91%. So, ladies and gentlemen, the successful adoption of the 2030 Development Agenda represents the country's political willingness towards sustainable development. The urgent task facing to us today is to put the vision into action. This needs close international cooperation. With the knowledge, experience, and best practice sharing, countries could learn from each other, inspire each other, and support each other. In this process, China is willing to further enhance the international cooperation, share our experiences and knowledge, and provide our support within our capacity. China is really very pleased to have supported UNEP's admirable effort in promoting multiple pathways towards sustainable development, and also very pleased to co-host this workshop with UNEP to conduct dialogue among the countries to share their growing knowledge and experience on this aspect. And I do hope that such dialogue will continue in the process of the implementation of the SDGs. And finally, I would like to wish this workshop a great success. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Good evening. I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting for the last 3 hours and I really need to be stretching my legs. But first, let me thank Madame Zhang for her wonderful speech, but also for the great support that UNEP has had on multiple pathways from China, but also congratulate China for the great work that it's doing in promoting ecological civilization and the benefits that we already see. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard what is the main objective of this workshop today. It's really to share the experiences further. But not just to share the experiences further, but also to deepen our understanding of what's going on across the world. We've heard again and again that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. We've heard again and again that even in the CPR just now, in the COW meeting, sorry, not in the CPR, but in the COW meeting, that you cannot just have one inclusive green economy for everybody, but what you want to do is look at pathways to sustainable development and look at what we mean by sustainable development and poverty eradication. It's in the context of that we're having this workshop to share the different approaches, but to also learn from you how we can take this idea forward better. So it's work in progress, as we've said again and again. We have now an hour and a half before us. So we have two moderated panels. I'll be doing the first one, and Fulai Shang will be doing the second one. The first one has 4 very interesting presentations, and may I invite the following people to the days. Mr. Norbu is already here. He is the Secretary National Environmental Commission of Bhutan. May I invite His Excellency Diego Pacheco, Vice Minister for Planning of Bolivia. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. It says, okay, you're replacing him. Yeah. Mr. Sultanov, the Chairman of the National Statistics Commission of the Kyrgyz Republic. Mr. James Kimonoyo, High Commissioner and Permanent Representative of Rwanda to UNEP. And Ms. Maria Krotzberger, Head German Environmental Agency. Welcome to all of you. May I request you to please join us here? So while our distinguished colleagues here take their seats, I just want to point to you that we've changed the order a little bit. We're going to start with Bhutan, who's going to speak about the green happiness, and then we will move to Bolivia, and then the order that I have just introduced them, the reason being that we move from concepts to more instrumental approaches. What we want to emphasize here is that these are multiple pathways. Each one is choosing them, and we want to understand the elements that make for these approaches. May I therefore call Mr. Narbu, the Secretary of National Environmental Commission, to make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. To talk about gross national happiness, I have to go way back in 1970s. In 1970s, our fourth king, Jimmy Singye Wanshu, was crowned. At that time, he is around 17 years old. At the same time, in that period, the concept of gross national happiness was born. Not only that, during that period in 1974, the first forest policy was also framed. And in that forest policy, a minimum of 60% of total land under forest must be maintained. That was in 1970s. Later, when we had our National Environment Protection Act 2007, this 60% was also featured. And with the introduction of democracy, our Constitution 2008 also reflects 60% of forest cover to be maintained in perpetuity. Now, given that background, with the concept of gross national happiness, we recognize 4 pillars to gross national happiness. One is economic, other is culture, environment, and good governance. And today I was asked to talk on how GNH is operationalized. Back at home, what our institutes, agencies have done is, first, the government has created Gross National Happiness Commission to mainstream gross national happiness in our sector plans. Then they developed Gross National Happiness Index with 9 domains and its indicators that captures the common aspiration of Bhutanese people, adopted as the development framework. Following that, 2 tools, GNH indicators, policy screening tools were developed. And after every 2 years, we carried out gross national survey, happiness survey, to assess the progress and sharpen the policy interventions towards gross national happiness. Now, we do follow 5-year planning cycle. And in that, result-based planning framework is geared towards achieving gross national happiness with national key results areas and performance indicators measuring 4 pillars. If I have to talk about it, it will at least take about half an hour. So I am just going to suggest, if you are interested, you should visit the details. It was presented in FAO regional workshop, that is APCA's Asian Pacific Commission on Agricultural Statistics meeting held in Thimphu, and presentation is available on regional FAO website. Now, just to give you one example, one of the pillars is preservation of environment. Now, how it is reflected into our planning framework. Under the planning framework, we have national key result areas. Under that, we look at carbon neutral. And when we talk about carbon neutral, under the key performance indicators, we measure greenhouse gas emission. That's one example. Another national key area is sustainable utilization of and management of natural resources. There we measure proportion of forest area under sustainable forest management. These are the examples. But whatever may be the approach or models we adopt, what is key for the success is we need a strong institutional support. Now, that we do have back at home. First is our inspiration is from our constitutional monarch. He is our role model in pursuing gross national happiness, in preserving our culture, promoting our culture, and conserving our environment. Equally important is political support. Regardless of which party comes to govern, attaining gross national happiness, conserving environment in particular will always remain a priority for our country. I want to give another good example where with the change of government, but still we are able to pursue one of the program that we are looking at is Bhutan for Life, a project Finance for Permanence. It was initiated by the previous government. Now it is being continued by currently elected government. And this is similar to Costa Rica Forever if you are from Latin America. Here, what we are looking at is, in the past, our country conservation is directly dependent on donor funding. Now, with the time, traditional donors are withdrawing it. But we like to see that our protected areas are financed in perpetuity. And on this background, Bhutan for Life is an innovative solution to securing financial sustainability for the protected area networks. Now, given that background, let me conclude by saying that I am sure some of you must have watched TED Talk by my Prime Minister of somewhere in February in Bangkok. It is mostly viewed, and I will encourage you to look at it. You will see what I mean by gross national happiness there. And also, if you want to learn and know more about gross national happiness, you must make a point to visit Bhutan. So I all welcome you to visit Bhutan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Narbu. I want to pick the 4 things that he identified because I think we will come back to this. And I do have a question for the audience after we finish with the speakers. So please keep this in mind. How can these approaches help countries towards sustainable development goals, the SDGs? So pick out the elements which you think can help, because that's the idea of taking this whole workshop forward. So, Mr. Narbu, you've identified that the gross national happiness had 4 pillars. It introduced key policy interventions to take it forward. You had a results-based framework in place in order to ensure that this is monitored, and there were surveys in place so that you could continuously get feedback loops into what was working, what was not working. And finally, you also said that this was possible because of strong institutions, strong values in the system itself, but also continuous political support to the concept of gross national happiness, irrespective of what party was in power. So this, to me, is a kind of I cannot do justice to gross national happiness, and the Prime Minister's speech is really one of the most inspirational speeches I've heard in my life, so it really is worth listening to. But just for the purposes of our thinking, these are the elements that have come up from Mr. Narbu. So thank you very much. Let me now turn to Ivy Beltram of Bolivia. Madam, my question to you is, the concept of living well reflects your country's unique worldview. And it's a very important worldview. We need to understand it much better. How would you frame this relationship between living well and sustainable development? It would really, if you could give us some examples of this in practice so one could absorb this and to take it forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Muchísimas gracias por la presentación. Y de pronto, hacer una reflexión. Consideramos que no es un enfoque único. Al contrario, es un enfoque compartido por diferentes culturas, por nuestras diferentes sociedades. Justamente en muchos de nuestros países, antes de los procesos de colonización, antes del siglo XVIII, definitivamente ya se entendía el concepto de la felicidad, del respeto
a las funciones ambientales. Entonces, definitivamente, esos diversos enfoques no son enfoques únicos, más bien son enfoques compartidos, ¿no? En relación al modelo de vivir bien en armonía con la Madre Tierra, es importante hacer unos antecedentes, ¿no? Y Bolivia ha ido rescatando justamente toda esta visión indígena de los pueblos y de las comunidades locales. Y ya el 2008, en una carta del señor presidente Evo Morales a las Naciones Unidas, lanza un primer mensaje el 2008 de salvemos al planeta del capitalismo. En el 2010, la Asamblea de Naciones Unidas declara el Día Internacional de la Madre Tierra. En Río +20 y en UNEA 1 se hace el reconocimiento a el vivir bien en armonía y balance con la Madre Tierra, estableciéndose como un modelo alternativo al capitalismo, en el que se plantea un desarrollo que esté complementado contra la lucha contra la pobreza, pero definitivamente respetando los sistemas de vida y permitiendo la capacidad de regeneración, como también conservando las funciones ambientales. En el proceso de este modelo existen también hitos nacionales que consideramos deberían ser ampliados a nivel internacional y mundial. Y justamente está el inicio con la ley de reconocimiento o la ley de los derechos de la Madre Tierra. En la legislación boliviana se establece a la tierra como un sujeto colectivo con derechos. Y permítanme justamente indicarles cuáles son los principales que se han reconocido. El derecho de la Madre Tierra a la vida, al mantenimiento de la integridad de sus sistemas y de sus procesos. Como un segundo derecho, el derecho a la preservación de la diferenciación y las variedades de los seres que la habitan. El derecho a preservar la funcionalidad de los ciclos del agua, de su existencia en calidad y cantidad, para el sostenimiento de los sistemas de vida. El derecho a la preservación de la calidad y composición del aire, para el sostenimiento de los sistemas de vida y protegerlos contra la contaminación. El derecho al equilibrio, en que se reconoce una restauración de la interrelación, la interdependencia, la complementariedad que tiene entre las sociedades y los diferentes sistemas de vida, los componentes de esta vida, y que tiene que desarrollarse ambas en un proceso equilibrado. El derecho a la restauración, el derecho de la Madre Tierra a vivir libre de contaminación en cualquiera de sus componentes de residuos tóxicos y nocivos, tanto a la salud humana como al ambiente. Esta ley justamente fue promulgada el 2010, en coincidencia con el año que en las Naciones Unidas se declara el Día Internacional de la Madre Tierra. En el 2012 se establece la Ley 300, que es una ley marco de la Madre Tierra y el desarrollo integral para vivir bien, en donde justamente se plantea la interrelación y un equilibrio en los sistemas de vida. Los sistemas de vida tienen un concepto más amplio que solamente un ecosistema. Los sistemas de vida plantean también el aspecto que tenemos la naturaleza, tenemos las sociedades, tenemos aspectos económicos, sociales, culturales. Entonces, va más allá de solamente quedarse en un término conservacionista y solo ecosistema, sino es una definición más amplia. En esta Ley 300 de Marco de la Madre Tierra y Desarrollo Integral para Vivir Bien, se plantea justamente la definición del vivir bien como el equilibrio de los sistemas de vida que tienen un equilibrio dinámico entre la protección y restauración de las funciones de vida, el reducir la extrema pobreza, la lucha contra la pobreza, y también trabajar y proteger los valores sociales y culturales. En la Ley 300 nos planteamos la complementariedad entre los derechos que les mencionaba, los derechos de la Madre Tierra, las obligaciones de los estados, de la sociedad civil, del sector privado y las responsabilidades también. Entonces, un primer elemento del vivir bien es justamente el reconocimiento de los derechos de la Madre Tierra. Otro aspecto bastante importante también en la Ley 300 y en nuestra legislación es el reconocer que no todo a lo que ponemos precio es a lo que protegemos. Y por ello se plantea que no a la comercialización, no a los mercados de las funciones ecosistémicas. Al contrario, consideramos que todos los esfuerzos y las inversiones tienen que ser para proteger, para mantener, para restaurar las funciones ambientales y no lucrar con ellas. La implementación en la práctica del enfoque de vivir bien se han tenido bastantes avances y sabemos también que tenemos bastantes desafíos. Cuando les hablábamos de un equilibrio, pongo para ustedes de pronto una representación de un triángulo. En un triángulo, en una primera arista, están justamente las funciones ambientales. Y necesitamos tener justamente ese equilibrio entre, en una arista, funciones ambientales, en otra arista, lo vinculado a la lucha contra la pobreza, y en la tercera arista, los sistemas productivos sustentables. Cuando hablamos de un equilibrio en estas tres aristas de un triángulo, estamos justamente hablando de implementaciones de modelos económicos, por ejemplo. En Bolivia se ha trabajado con un cambio de un proceso privatizador, de un proceso de capitalización hacia un proceso de redistribución de la riqueza. Se han nacionalizado las principales empresas de Bolivia y con esos recursos ya nacionales se han establecido modelos de redistribución de la riqueza y este aspecto ha permitido que se reduzca la extrema pobreza de un 38%, ha bajado al 18%. Las tasas de desempleo de casi 9% se han reducido al 4%. Y la relación de ingresos entre los más ricos y los más pobres ha bajado de 128 veces a solo 42 veces. Entonces, hay indicadores de que este cambio de la capitalización hacia un proceso de nacionalización y el beneficio a nuestras poblaciones tiene un fruto concreto. En cuanto a las funciones ambientales y sistemas productivos, se han establecido también indicadores que pueden reflejar cuáles son aquellos parámetros que puedan permitirnos las líneas de base y después de una implementación. Entonces, en la parte de la implementación concreta hay algunos puntos importantes en nuestro modelo. La no mercantilización de las funciones ambientales, el desarrollo integral y sostenible con un énfasis en el rescate de las tradiciones y de los conocimientos locales e indígenas, el respeto entre, o más bien el balance entre lo que son los derechos de la población al desarrollo, sin comprometer las funciones ambientales, la conservación de la diversidad biológica y cultural como un efecto muy importante, y enfatizar también los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. En cuanto a también algunos ejemplos de actividades concretas, se han desarrollado en el país programas de, por ejemplo, Mi Agua, que son proyectos que justamente han permitido que un desarrollo integral en comunidades rurales, que respetan todo el ciclo del agua, que hacen la protección de sus fuentes, a la vez que mejoran sus condiciones de vida, tanto para el consumo de agua como para el proceso de irrigación con uso eficiente del agua. Así también estamos con programas de Cosechando Vida, Sembrando Luz, en el que se están estableciendo programas de justamente de reservorios en áreas muy dispersas, y también el de tener sistemas fotovoltaicos para proveer de energía en aquellas ciudades dispersas en las que no entraría un sistema de red convencional. Así también en el aspecto de la restauración de funciones ambientales, estamos con un programa de restauración ambiental de 22 municipios, más de 1,5 millones de habitantes, en todas las áreas colindantes al lago más alto del mundo, al lago Titicaca, en el que se plantean medidas integrales de forestación, de manejo de residuos sólidos, actividades productivas. Entonces, está justamente ese triángulo para luchar contra la pobreza, mantener las funciones ambientales y un sistema productivo. Entonces, este modelo de vida plantea justamente este aspecto para un beneficio de la población. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much for that. It's so rich that I'm afraid I'm going to find it difficult to summarize, but I'll try. Because I think it's very important for us to capture some of this. I think the key message that Ms. Beltram brings to us is the interdependence and complementarity of environment and human well-being, not one above the other, but both together. There's a balance. There is a need for a balance and equilibrium between these two paradigms. And what I think you're suggesting is a more holistic approach which brings together the social and the economic systems, and to respect the rights of the environment, but also the rights of indigenous communities and rights of different aspects or different populations in the country. And of course, with that goes the respect for diversity. An important point that you made was not to commodify nature, not to treat everything as capital, but to think of it in terms of what kind of services it can provide to human well-being, and it does not have to have a price tag. I think that's what you said in your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, this is really very interesting. It's also very interesting because we picked a lot of these ideas along with ideas from Gross National Happiness in the Inclusive Green Economy, and I would strongly recommend you to read it. Don't be too concerned about the term green economy, but the fact that it has elements from what you are talking about. Because at the end of the day, we have to have some narrative which picks from the different worldviews, and that's what we are hoping we can capture. You know, if tomorrow that is not the word that we want to use, we can talk about it, but these are the key things that have come out from your presentation, and thank you very much for that. Let me now turn to Mr. Sultanov from the Kyrgyz Republic. The Kyrgyz Republic has recently joined the Partnership for Action in the Green Economy. So what are your country's key sustainable development issues, and how do you find that this approach helps you? What do you see the major opportunities for such a transition in your country? What are the good points? What are the challenges? Thank you.
Глубоко уважаемые представители стран-участниц Ассамблеи, уважаемые дамы и господа, уважаемые организаторы.
Dear representative of the member countries of the Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers.
Позвольте поздравить вас с этим замечательным мероприятием Генеральной Ассамблеи экологической программы ООН на высоком уровне. От имени Кыргызской Республики позвольте поблагодарить за приглашение участвовать в работе Генеральной Ассамблеи и выступить на сегодняшней сессии. Я имею огромную честь представить Кыргызскую Республику и поделиться нашим опытом в продвижении вопросов устойчивого развития, важной темы нашего времени сегодня.
Let me congratulate you on this wonderful event, the United Nations Environment Assembly at the highest level. On behalf of the Kyrgyz Republic, let me thank you for the invitation to participate in the Assembly and speak at today's session. I have the great honor to represent the Kyrgyz Republic and share our experience in the promotion of sustainable development, today's important topic.
Мы подошли к важнейшему моменту в истории наших стран, когда негативные изменения состояния окружающей среды грозят социально-экономическому развитию и способности самостановления экосистем. В настоящее время Кыргызская Республика продолжает активно работать для продвижения устойчивого развития страны как член мирового сообщества и ООН.
We have approached an important point in the history of our country when negative environmental changes threaten the socio-economic development and self-healing ability of ecosystems. Currently, the Kyrgyz Republic continues to work actively to promote sustainable development of the country as a member of the world community and the UN.
Каков же был этот путь? Высшим политическим руководством страны был официально объявлен курс на устойчивое развитие. Идея устойчивого развития сейчас как никогда оказалась созвучной традициям, духу и менталитету народов Кыргызстана, который может сыграть исключительно важную роль в развитии страны.
What was this pathway? The highest political leadership of the country has officially declared a policy of sustainable development. As never before, the idea of sustainable development has become in tune with the tradition, spirit and mentality of people of Kyrgyzstan, which could play a crucial role in the development of the country.
Хочется подчеркнуть, что политический базис для устойчивого развития построен. Подтверждением политического курса Кыргызской Республики на устойчивое развитие стало создание 24 ноября 2012 года Национального совета по устойчивому развитию при президенте Кыргызской Республики, которая работает, объединяя усилия всех ветвей государственной власти, частного сектора и гражданского общества по вопросам будущего развития Кыргызстана. Национальный совет служит политической площадкой самого высокого уровня.
I would like to emphasize that the political basis for sustainable development is in place. The proof for the policy of the Kyrgyz Republic on sustainable development is the creation of the National Council for Sustainable Development in the Kyrgyz Republic under the President on 24 November 2012, which combines the efforts of all branches of government, the private sector and civil society on the issues of future development for Kyrgyzstan. The National Council is the political platform at the highest level.
21 января 2013 года указом президента Кыргызской Республики утверждена национальная стратегия устойчивого развития Кыргызской Республики на период 2013-2017 года, где обозначены стратегические ориентиры новой модели устойчивого развития и главные приоритеты.
On January 21st, in 2013, the National Strategy for Sustainable Development of the Kyrgyz Republic for the period 2013-17 was adopted by the decree of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic, which marked the strategic guidelines for the new model of sustainable development and the main priorities.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, 2015 год был историческим с точки зрения единства мирового сообщества и принятие новых глобальных целей в области устойчивого развития. И саммит ООН по устойчивому развитию, прошедший в сентябре 2015 года, одобрил цели в области устойчивого развития до 2030 года.
The year 2015 was historic in terms of the unity of the global community in the adoption of new global sustainable development goals. and the UN Summit on Sustainable Development held in September 2015 encouraged the Sustainable Development Goals for the period of 2015-13.
В настоящее время Кыргызская республика начинает национальный процесс адаптации целей устойчивого развития в стране. Сегодня Национальный статистический комитет принимает активное участие в процессе разработки мониторинга будущих глобальных индикаторов мониторинга ЦУР, как член межучрежденческой экспертной группы по разработке показателей мониторинга ЦУР.
At present, the Kyrgyz Republic begins the process of adaptation of national sustainable development goals. Today, the National Statistical Committee is actively involved in the development of monitoring of future global indicators, of monitoring the SDGs as a member of the Interagency Expert Group on the development of monitoring indicators of SDGs. The NSC monitors the green growth indicators existing in the system of state statistics, which are published in annual statistical publications and StatKG mobile application. As a further contribution to activities aimed at sustainable development, I want to emphasize the activities of the National Statistical Committee of the Kyrgyz Republic in natural capital accounting.
В планах Нацстаткома до 2019 года предусматривается разработка системы показателей устойчивого развития. И в условиях жестких временных рамок по реализации отдельных задач ЦУР до 2020 года. Сегодня Нацстаткому необходима помощь в построении системы мониторинга показателей устойчивого развития, отвечающую современным требованиям.
The strategic plans of the NSC until 2019 provided for the development of a system of sustainable development indicators and under tight time frames for the implementation of individual tasks of the SDGs until 2020. Today, the National Statistical Committee needs assistance in building a system of monitoring for sustainable development that meets more modern requirements.
В заключение своего выступления хотел бы особо подчеркнуть, что необходимо твердо и решительно двигаться вперед путем сплочения усилий всех государств, объединения политической воли участников международной жизни к всестороннему взаимодействию для преодоления угроз и вызов во имя сохранения мира и благополучия, созидательного развития для будущих поколений человечества. Благодарю за внимание.
In conclusion, I would like to stress on the idea that we must firmly and resolutely move forward by uniting the efforts of all states, political will of the participants of international life, to the full interaction to overcome the threats and challenges in the name of peace and well-being and creative development for future generations of mankind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sultanov. And what you've said to us is something that we've also heard from the earlier speakers, which is a redefinition of the paradigms, a focus on ecosystem services, strong institutions, and now, because of the SDGs, a focus on linking what the thinking was within the country to the SDGs, but also monitoring this in the context of the green growth. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to change the order again because Ms. Krotzberger has to leave. So I'm going to request her to speak first with indulgence of Mr. James Kimonoyo. So we will do the circular economy first and then come to wealth accounting and valuation of ecosystems services at the end of this panel session. Ms. Krotzberger, over to you, please.
Thank you very much for this little change in the panel discussion, also to my neighbor, Mr. Kimonoyo. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, also thank you to the Unep for hosting this really inspiring exchange between very holistic approaches and more concrete strategies, which I was supposed to present here. I was asked to talk a little bit about circular economy in Germany and what have been some of the key successes in Germany. I couldn't mention all of them because, as you know, green economy, sustainable production and lifestyles or the behavior of people and circular economy are very well linked together, and we cannot always look at every aspect of this. But to begin with some general remarks, I think circular economy requires us to think in terms of what is known as material flows. And these material flows take the entire life cycle of raw materials and the products manufacturers with them into account. This is very important. It starts with the mining of precious materials and rare earth elements that are needed for production, and it goes right through the moment when these products themselves are recycled. So how did we start and move this approach in Germany? I think the first ideas of closing material cycles were developed in Germany in the field of waste management. We now have more than 40 years experience with environmental sound management of waste, and we are still in the process of developing a circular economy, so it took us a long time. We started with very simple measures like separate collection of metals, of glass, of paper, and based on this there were further developments including the recycling of other materials or products like plastics, like batteries, which were very important, and also electrical devices, electrical appliances or pharmaceuticals. And we made many experiences and observations which we are always happy to share and which may be helpful also for others. Still, I have to admit, we have many knowledge gaps and we are not on the end of this way, but for us also cooperation is very important and we always can learn more and more. So closing the loop of product life cycles through recycling and reuse is one of the core messages for implementing circular economy. And no doubt promoting recycling through increasing recycling rates and improving quality of secondary raw materials are very important aspects. But we also learned that there's a close link between circular economy, resource efficiency, and climate change mitigation. Especially in the discussions, also in the context with the SDGs, we often stress these interdependencies. For example, avoiding methane formation in landfills is a very effective measure to reduce greenhouse gases. And it's at the same time an important contribution for effective circular economy. Another instrument which in particular contributes to waste prevention and recycling is what we call producer responsibility. Examples are packaging or especially electrical and electronic devices. Producer responsibility hands manufacturers the legal responsibility for ensuring that their products are recycled in a high quality, in an environmentally friendly way, and that they are disposed in an environmentally sound manner. And this aspect also leads to another very important point, the careful product design. We think that the product design itself is a main key to reducing the environmental impacts that products cause over their entire life cycle. And environmental protection related design criteria should be, as we think, and we are working on this, enshrined as principles of equal rank to the practical, the economic, and legal requirements to the design process. And above all, product design must make use of approaches that increase the lifespan of products. That is very important. And also to make products more easier to repair and to recycle. So I don't talk in this context about another aspect which we think is important, that's the lifestyle and the point that the consumption of resources must diminish absolutely and must decoupled from economic growth. That's a very engaged discussion we are leading in Germany right now. I don't go into this. But I was also asked what were the challenges in implementing a circular economy and the greatest challenges. And I think in Germany it was to ban waste landfills and to implement and monitor this ban. This was a very important decision. And still in Europe, landfills and municipal solid waste still pose a major challenge we are discussing right now. And this is very important for implementing circular economy as well as for protecting the climate. We made a research study, we presented a research study also in Brussels, and we found out that if we would stop the landfill of municipal solid waste in Europe alone, this could contribute close to 100 million tons of CO2 equivalents in net reduction to the EU's greenhouse gas balance. That's not little, but this requires a complete diversion from waste from landfills as well as the use of the waste for a high-quality recycling and energy recovery. We think it would be a crucial measure to implement SDG 13, that is taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And at the same time, I want to mention that as well, this measure would also create jobs in the waste management sector. In Germany, this sector has grown over the last decades to around 3,000 employees. Well, I will end with a very technical example concerning the question how we can support also other countries in adopting the principle of a circular economy. And I want to mention here also, this is a very singular aspect, the eco-labels. We believe that eco-labels play a very important role as well. In Germany, we call our eco-label Blue Angel, and these labels have a very important approach to making environmentally friendly products more transparent, especially for the consumers. And we want, that's our interest, strengthen the eco-labels worldwide, and so we are cooperating very strongly with other national labels, such as the Chinese eco-label or the Japanese eco-label. And the idea is that we try to harmonize the criteria and the mutual certification. So this will make it easier for product manufacturers to receive the eco-label in partner countries. And we are quite optimistic that we will manage to do so. There are many other experiences I would like to share with you, and I can't do this here, but I would like to tell you that we have a very well website in our agency which gives a broad overview about different topics that are relevant for implementing circular economy. I think this website gives a good access to technology providers and contacts as well. And in the end, I can say we did a lot of research on different environmental fields, but we did very little research on the gross national. No, we did no research on the gross national happiness up to now. So I'm happy to learn from Bhutan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Krotzberger. You know, it's very interesting. We heard from Ivy, if I may call you Ivy, about what Bolivia is doing as being an alternative to capitalism. What I hear from you is a corrective to capitalism, because in a way, what you're proposing is to visit the whole idea of circular economy in the context of planned obsolescence, which was so crucial to creating demand in market-driven economies. And so what you're saying is you extend the life of the product, you look at it from the material flows perspective, you introduce regeneration into the very design of the product, you look at it from a point of view of the whole life cycle of the product, and therefore consumption becomes very much part of this. And so you can see, therefore, that circular economy can be one way of correcting some of the ills of what we understood as market-driven approaches earlier, or capitalism earlier. So we're moving towards a kind of a thinking which is, okay, the environment creates, or the kind of economy that we had has created problems to the environment, and now how do we work towards reducing this? And you've picked on producer responsibility, careful product design, and on eco-labels, and closing the loop of the product cycles. I think, and you also link this to job creation, SCPs, and climate change from the point of view of the SDGs. So thank you very much, Ms. Krotzberger. That was sharp and very useful. I know you have to leave, so whenever you need to, please do so, but thank you very much for being with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I turn to the last speaker, but very important speaker of this panel, which is His Excellency Mr. James Kimonoyo. Rwanda joined the Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services program in 2013, what is known as WAVES. What we would very much like to understand is what motivated your country to doing this, and what you see as the advantages, the challenges of accounting and evaluation. This is an issue which is very often a problem. Some countries do not believe in accounting and valuation, some do, and be very useful to understand better how you see this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Unep for inviting Rwanda to be on this panel. Just as my colleagues on the panel just mentioned, I think what's critical is for us, how do we manage our economic growth in relation to the sustainable development? What are we doing today to make sure that future generations benefit from what we are putting in place today? And so, as you know, Rwanda is one of the fastest growing economies in the world since 2000, when we developed our blueprint, which is Vision 2020, and eventually some strategic plans like EDPRS 1 and 2. The strategic plans envisages a lot of programs, but at the same time trying to ensure mainstreaming of environmental sustainability. And I would want to use this opportunity also to thank UNEP and Undp for supporting Rwanda in the Poverty Environment Initiative, whereby we have been able to bring together all the institutions to plan together to make sure that whatever we do today, be it infrastructure, energy, agriculture, they are going to be sustained. And in the context of Agenda 2030, we still see the synergies in what we have done as Rwanda since 2000 in the Vision 2020. Now, coming to the issue of wealth accounting and the evaluation of ecosystem services, particularly natural capital account, as you know, it's a kind of a new paradigm, and many countries have not really grasped the importance of conducting the natural account capital account, because Rwanda, as you know, it's been growing, as I said, at 8% annually. But then we realized that the measurement of the economic growth globally is based on the economic output, the GDP. Now, this is a departure from this traditional, conventional way of evaluating the economies of different countries. But this is a very important process for us, because we realized early on in 2012 that actually as we plan our development, we need to understand what is it that is going to spur our economy. What do we have in place? The highest forms of growth are based on knowledge, yes, but how about the natural resources? How is this knowledge going to convert the natural resources into something sustainable? And so to understand the resources that will make a major contribution to an economic growth was very important. That's the reason why we thought the natural capital account is important for the country. But also understand that the constraints that some of the resources that we are using or relying on in terms of economic growth, for instance, land. As you know, Rwanda is a very small country, a country of 12 million people. living on a land not more than 10,000 square miles or 26,000 square kilometers, high population density, and 80% living in rural areas on agriculture. Land being one of the natural resources, how do you use that land under that stress and to make sure that you sustain it for future generations? So understanding the resources you have and what is it that they contribute to our economic growth, but also understanding the challenges and constraints so that we take measures ahead of time to make sure that as we pursue economic development goals, we ensure that this is going to be sustained. And so we selected in that process about 5 sectors, priority sectors, to be able to measure the contribution to economic growth, but also how we sustainably use the resources in energy, water, minerals, land, and forests. So far, what has been done is to do the scoping in those areas. What is it that we are going to do to make sure that we implement programs in these particular sectors I just mentioned in a very sustainable way? We expect that at the conclusion of the analysis and understanding exactly how much resources and how much contribution they are going to make to an economic growth, and what are the measures that we are taking to make sure that these resources are used to grow our economy, to transform our country, but in a much more sustainable way. In 2014, there was a large consultative meeting between central and local government, supervised by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Planning, to make sure that in the district development plans and the central government plans, we have synergies, and we ensure that each one of the programs that are under the key priority areas are executed in a very sustainable way. And so the natural capital account has helped us to understand that whatever we've been doing in the last almost 15 years, we've been doing it based on the conventional way of implementing economic investments and so on and so forth. But what have we done to make sure that we understand how much you have in terms of resources and how we are going to utilize them to make sure that we achieve sustainable development? And so there are many programs under those. When I talk about EDPRS 1 and 2, we have different programs, and each one of those, before the Ministry of Planning and Finance provides any funding, you have to justify how or show or illustrate how this program is going to make an impact and how it's going to be sustained. Maybe I stop there. We probably cover certain things when the Q&A comes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And what you've heard again is a very pragmatic approach to addressing an issue which, of course, was key to your country, which is a resource scarcity around land. And so that promoted or pushed you into looking at the issue of valuation, because you realized that unless you thought of valuation, you were unable to make the decisions that you needed to make. Now, again, these would have issues for other countries, but we can come back to that in a minute. Fulai, I know that we are running late and you have another panel, so I was going to ask a broader question of the audience, but maybe I'll keep the question for later if people still have the energy after the next panel. So let me stop this panel for now. Thank you very much for being here with us. I'm going to summarize at the end, so I'm not going to do a summary now, but thank you very much, all of you.
May I invite the panelists for our next session to please come forward to the stage. In this next panel, we have the honor to have the following distinguished panelists. Do we have His Excellency Kama from Botswana? And do we have His Excellency Hakan from the Netherlands, the ambassador to the UN here in Nairobi? And do we have Madame Zhang from China? And also, do we have the UN South-South Cooperation Center, Mr. Chadek? Please come forward, and let's try to be efficient in this final session. And thank you for staying with us. In the last session, we have heard a very rich range of approaches, national approaches, national pathways to sustainable development. We have heard the Living Well approach from Bolivia. We have the gross national happiness from Bhutan. And we have inclusive green economy in Kyrgyzstan. And we also have heard circular economy experience from Germany. Now, in this panel, I would like to, if I may, I would like to ask our distinguished panelists some more pointed questions, if I may, starting from His Excellency Karma. No, sorry. Okay. Okay, I was just informed that Mr. Karma was replaced by Mr. Jimmy Opello, yeah, Deputy Permanent Secretary of Botswana, yeah. Now, Mr. Opello, your country has been implementing natural capital accounting for quite a number of years. Now, we would like to hear from you, from your perspective, how useful you think an approach like natural capital accounting, which has been implemented in other countries as well, but in your particular country, tell us how useful you think this approach has been in supporting Botswana's approach to sustainable development. Could you please?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Facilitator. Let me first of all thank the government of the Republic of China and UNEP for making sure that in this event there is a discussion of this nature where we learn from each other as the global community. The issue of wealth accounting for natural resource in Botswana is not that very long in place, but what I would like to state here is the fact that we are into the program of waves where we take accounts of our natural resources. And the whole objective of doing this exercise is to know how much of our natural capital is out there. And we're basically doing this for the purpose of planning. And we have, if I take you a little bit back in the history of Botswana, since independence, and that goes back to 50 years ago, there has been in place and still is the National Development Program. Now, this National Development Program is a 6-year cycle upon which the country goes through a level of planning that takes into account the socio-economic aspect as well as the environment and the development that people will need. This has served us well, but with the emerging trends and emerging situation, we have come to realize as a country that sustainable development cannot be achieved merely through the process of cash flow accounting that does not take into account how much of the natural resources that we live on, the consumption patterns and the reserves that is available. This is simply because the type of planning that we undertake in Botswana comes from the fact that we have long envisaged the concept and definition of sustainable development. Those of you who were there at the first Rio conference will recall that Botswana delegation was led by the former president, His Excellency Masire, who took the podium to explain in our own context what sustainable development is. And in his words, he had said that sustainable development is the development that takes into account the needs of the current generation without jeopardizing the future of the next generation. Since then, we have always put that thinking in our development process. The multiple pathways through sustainable development and poverty eradication is a process that has started a little bit long way down the line. We have had a program that took into account the interfacing of poverty and environment. But I want to highlight from the beginning here that in order for us, from our experience, to have sustainable environment being meaningful and taking place in a manner that will yield results for everybody else, there is need to first of all put into place the mechanisms that will address social equity, the sustainable consumption of the natural resources, which is the natural capital, as well as the environment, the health of the environment. But there are key points that need to make sure that those aspects are realized. And first in the line of order is good governance. In the case of Botswana, we have been very fortunate in that we have had good governance since independence. The next thing is what other people have already indicated, and that is the political will. The political will, as I mentioned, in Rio 1992, was there from the previous president, His Excellency Masire. The current president is a renowned environmentalist and a conservationist who believes in taking care of the environment that takes care of its people through good governance. There is also the need for the supporting structures. Sustainable development and poverty eradication from...
Mr. Bella, would you be able to focus on the natural capital?
Okay.
Please.
Sustainable development to be realized with poverty eradication cannot be achieved without proper structures in place. But in terms of the value of natural capital, Botswana as a country, as I indicated, has come to convince itself that the development of the country lies primarily by taking care of its natural capital. And here, by natural capital, in the context of Botswana, we are looking at the biodiversity and the ecosystems that we have, the essence of valuing it. If I take an example of tourism, the tourism in Botswana is a thriving sector, and it thrives because we have taken care of the biodiversity in terms of wildlife. This wildlife is the one that is an attraction to the global community. We've also taken measures to make sure we create the financing mechanism to take care of the biodiversity, what is also called the biofin. Within the Vision 2036, we have made it in the planning process that accounting for the natural capital is going to be the cornerstone of the development process in the new development path. In other words, what we are talking of is a situation where we value our minerals. We'll need to know how much of minerals we have and what they cost in terms of the social life and in terms of the economic sense. We need to know how much of the energy do we have, how much of the water do we have. And in that process, it has made it easy for us to plan for the consumption patterns and to plan for the future in taking account of the resources that we have. This is an experience that we have wanted very much to share with yourself. It's a process that is iterative, it is still growing, and we have, on conclusion, we have now put in place what is called National Strategy for Sustainable Development. This is a framework that outlines how the natural capital is going to be used as a yardstick to determine the economic development of our country. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Opelo, for sharing with us the Botswana's experience in using natural capital accounting, wealth accounting, and in particular with a very strong emphasis being to know what is out there and also to really find out how important the country's biodiversity, wildlife, ecosystem can be for sustaining a very important economic sector such as tourism. So thank you very much, Mr. Opelo, for sharing that experience with us. Now, let me come to His Excellency Marken. I know you are from the Netherlands, but you are here to speak about the European Union's circular economy experience. In the last session, we already heard the presentation from Germany, the national experience in implementing circular economy in Germany. But now, I would like to turn to His Excellency Marken to share with us how the European Union supports its member states, how the Union supports its member states in implementing this very important strategy which runs across the European Union. Would you like to please share with us?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, People's Republic of China and Unep for organizing this session. Indeed, the subject will be our actions in Europe, but I will touch a little bit on the Netherlands as well, if you don't mind. If you extrapolate the current developments when it comes to production, consumption, and population growth, then by 2050, we will need 3 planets to sustain ourselves. And it's clear that this linear development cannot be sustained in the way it is going now. And the thinking has literally to turn around into circular thinking. And I think that the circular economy is the concept that we are now adopting in Europe, and that is being supported in Europe, in the EU, by the EU Action Plan on Circular Economy. It is a support by the EU to its member states when it comes to circular economy and the implementation of this concept, which is very much a set of measures that has been drawn up by the Commission in order to support, for the next 3 years, in order to support these initiatives. Now, if you ask member states to follow some duties and requirements when it comes to the environment, like recycling of waste, recycling targets in various countries, it also needs to be supported. And waste as a resource is one of these examples where countries that do choose to follow this path, and there are funds available to support them in these innovative approaches. The 2 funds, Horizon 2020 and Life Plus, which can be used to buy time from consultants, or maybe sometimes it doesn't cost money, but it's a matter of rules and regulations, or creating platforms for exchange of information. So in that sense, the support is both in terms of funds, but also in terms of setting rules and regulations and offering platforms for exchange. Now, the question that has been asked sometimes, that if you start recycling on a big scale, doesn't it mean that developing countries will export less because they are the ones who are probably going to suffer if we are going to recycle so much that we need less? Well, if we think back on the 3 planets we normally would need by 2050, I think that if we can do it still with 1 planet, then the developing countries are still very much assured of their export markets. But much more than that, I think that the new markets that are being developed, the new products, the innovative thinking, new business models, is not something that is just for the Western countries. That is something for the whole world, and we expect also developing countries to benefit from this development. Creating value from waste is one such business model where we think that also developing countries can benefit tremendously. Other than maybe the Millennium Development Goals, which was very much with governments, the Sustainable Development Goals is very much about partnerships. We can't do it alone as governments. We need partners in civil society, in private sector. And I think that, and now I'm touching a little bit on the Netherlands quickly, we have founded a global goals charter, and that is between non-state actors and government on circular economy. And that charter has already some 60 non-state actors that are now cooperating with government on the Sustainable Development Goals, on the 2030 agenda. And of course, we do hope that this concept is being replicated within the EU, but also beyond. Another thing I would like to mention is the Green Deal. It's also a concept in the Netherlands in which non-state actors have certain ambitions. These ambitions sometimes have obstacles in getting them realized. And the deal, the Green Deal with government, is that if these obstacles can be removed by government, they will do so. So in that sense, it is a Green Deal that is between non-state actors and government on the obstacles to a green future, where government is committed to take away these obstacles. And at this moment, there are about 200 Green Deals already in the Netherlands, again, with a multitude of partners being involved in these deals. And we also have one international one already, which is called the North Sea Resources Roundabout, which is about the transport of waste in the countries bordering the North Sea. Now, coming to Unep and coming back to the emphasis on partnerships, like we've done in our opening statement, nobody, not UNEP, not the governments can do this alone. We do need non-state actors, we need private sector, and we also hope that when it comes to realizing 2030 SDGs, that also UNEP will become a platform to exchange ideas like tonight, in which the ones who are implementing are benefiting from each other's experience. So, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, His Excellency Ambassador Marken, for sharing with us not only the experience from the EU in terms of how EU supports its member states in implementing a circular economy through not only through funding support but also through norms, norm setting, rules and standards. And in addition, I'm also very intrigued by the Dutch Green Deals, which is basically, government signing agreements with non-state actors regarding how to overcome obstacles. in transitioning into a green future. Very, very intriguing, and I think if in the future we are going to have a forum like this, wherever it may be, it will be very, very interesting to have a more complete exposition of the Dutch experience, and hopefully written up by your Dutch colleagues back home. So thanks again, and let me now quickly switch to China, Madame Zhang, and we have already heard in your opening remarks some reference, some introduction to China's ecological civilization approach to sustainable development. Here, I would like you to give us one example, one success story of how China implements ecological civilization. Okay, just give me one successful example. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And well, just to be very simple, I just give you directly to the moderator's question to give you the example on how actually the effectiveness of implementation of the eco-civilization strategy. So I may give you the example to see one city in China, and that is the city of Shenzhen, which is the neighboring city of Hong Kong. And as it is a kind of pilot city in implementing China's opening up policy. So its economy has developed very fast in the past years, and it has been one of the front runners in terms of economic development among the Chinese cities. However, this fast economic development also provides environmental degradation, and especially for the air pollution. So in those years, the air pollution has been a very serious problem in this city. And for instance, I may give you an example data to show that how serious the air pollution in the city was. Actually, in the year 2004, the city was suffered from the smog in half of the year. So that means more than 100 days of the year, the citizens in the city suffered from the haze. And then there are definitely a lot of complaints from the people in the city. And then over the past 10 years, guided by the eco-civilization strategy, the city has made up their mind to solve the problem. So they have taken various measures to tackle the air pollution issue in the city. They have optimized their economic structure, upgrade their industries, and phased out outdated production capacity, and also developed the newly emerging strategic sectors. And then in the year 2015, another data shows the improvement of the air quality in this city. So in the year 2015, actually the level of the PM 2.5 was reduced by more than 50%, compared to the figure in the year 2004. And at the same period, actually the GDP growth was increased by about 3.5 times. So from this example, you actually could see that with the economic development, we actually have decoupled from the environmental degradation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madame Zhang, for giving us the example of Shenzhen, where under the ecological civilization approach, the economic performance, economic growth has not suffered. Actually, it has performed better, while at the same time, the city has been able to significantly reduce its air pollution. And so that gives us hope. And also, it reminds me of the observations or the remarks made by Ambassador Marken, in the sense that developing countries could indeed look for new opportunities, new markets, new businesses, as Europe or other parts of the world switch to a circular economy. So, finally, let me invite Mr. Chedek, the envoy of the Secretary General on South-South Cooperation and Director of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation. And I'd like to ask a question the South-South cooperation has played a very important role in helping countries to exchange experiences, sharing information amongst themselves on issues regarding sustainable development. Now, I would like to ask, in the context of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, how does your center plan to help the countries in the South to implement the SDGs? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Also congratulate you on your stamina. I'm the 11th speaker of this panel. I hope I'll be up to the challenge of complementing the very interesting presentations we had before. Last week we had a meeting of the United Nations High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation. That is a subordinate organ of the General Assembly that has universal membership. And that group answered the first part of your question. It said that South-South cooperation is a key element for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda. You can say, okay, that's a political argument. But we took the opportunity of that particular debate to present a series of case studies, which we compiled only among a series of United Nations agencies and close partners with the support of UNDP, and we managed in this very short process to identify 61 South-South practices that we could link with the 17 SDGs. So the answer to the question is yes, South-South cooperation has been contributing to the achievement of the SDGs even before they were promulgated. Now, what's next? What's next? We also have the responses in the declaration itself, the one that approved the SDGs, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and other documents, all of which called for increased engagement in South-South cooperation in getting this agenda, making this agenda reality. And the good news is that for many years, South-South cooperation was always there, achieving very beautiful results, but it was not as scaled up as it has become. In that context, I want to highlight, particularly because they are co-hosts, the generosity of the government of the People's Republic of China that has made a significant commitment of resources to support South-South cooperation. So now we have resources because many countries are committing, and in addition we have successful practices of the South. What are the obstacles to this? One is that southern countries by definition, also northern countries do, have very pressing needs. So politically it is very difficult for the leaders of those countries to commit resources for external cooperation. I heard it working in many countries that are developing at the same time when to engage. Why are we helping the poor in other countries when we still have many poor in our homes, in our countries? Another second problem is organizational and institutional. Many of the traditional cooperation structures in developing countries are geared towards receiving cooperation from mostly traditional donors, multilateral organizations. And in many occasions, they do not have the tools to become providers of South-South cooperation. So that's an additional institutional limitation. That limitation also applies to many of the traditional donor countries vis-à-vis supporting triangular cooperation. Many of them cannot do it. So therefore, the challenge is to remove those institutional obstacles and also to get a clear definition of the role of South-South cooperation in 2030. As I said before, it has been already validated politically, but there are still some questions that might need to be answered. Questions such as, what are the mechanisms we are going to promote? How are we going to measure South-South cooperation? We already have very well-developed principles that will not be changed, the principles that were established as far away as Bandung in the 1950s, but confirmed in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the Buenos Aires Plan of Action of '78, or in Nairobi in 2009. I'm speaking in the political succession that led to the legal framework of South-South cooperation. But we need, perhaps, a new application of all these principles to the new realities that I've just presented beforehand. In that context, we have been proposing the organization of a conference in 2018 to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, to create a moment for strong advocacy and also to answer these questions, to relaunch even further and even stronger South-South cooperation for the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us the experience from the South-South Cooperation Center and the Modern Center, because South-South Cooperation has existed for many, many years. As you rightly mentioned, South-South Cooperation existed even before the 2030 Agenda or SDGs were defined. And of course, there are challenges moving forward, not in terms of principles, but more in terms of institutional mechanisms and how do we strengthen the implementation and make South-South cooperation more operational. So thank you very much. Now, I know we have approached the final minutes, but I still would like to invite any question or any comment from the floor. In particular, I would like to hear, at least from one intervention, if I may, on how Unep or any other international organization can support the countries, whether in the south or in the north, to do better in terms of sharing their experience and strategies related to sustainable development in the future. Because this will be very important for us to consider what we need to do in the future in this particular area of promoting the sharing of experiences of multiple pathways to sustainable development. So, is there any comment, any intervention from the floor? At least one, to make me feel better. Anything that UNEP or any other international body can do to help countries to share this type of experiences as we have done today. And apology to our interpreters, and let's, if you do have to leave, I fully understand, but let's try to complete in, thanks very much, finish in the next few minutes, okay? Thanks. So, I am expecting someone to please give at least one intervention, okay? I'm sure someone will come forward, as I expected. Please.
Thank you, and thank you for the encouragement. I'm Michael Stanley Jones from the UNDP UNEP Poverty Environment Initiative. It was mentioned earlier by the panel, and I thank the panelists for their interesting presentations and the variety of pathways that were revealed this evening. The Poverty Environment Initiative, which has been dedicated for more than a decade to mainstreaming poverty and environment in sustainable development, has shared recently, as 2015, its experience in a handbook on mainstreaming, and we hope that this material can be transformed and made useful at country level as it provides multiple models, not only the PEI model, but multiple models and examples and methodologies and tools for working across goals, for integrating through national planning, budgeting, and programming multiple objectives that we see are shining through in the new agenda for 2030. Thank you.
Thank you. Your intervention has certainly made me feel much better. At least we have heard a voice from the floor. So with that, let me pass the floor to Lydia to conclude this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phula, and thank you to all the participants for being here today, and to you for being here. I know it's been a long day. We ourselves are very tired, but this was an important workshop for us, not just for us, UNEP, but for all of us at UNEA, because it was very much part of a very clear mandate that was given to UNEP at the last UNEA to collect and share countries' experiences in sustainable development. We want to make it very clear that we don't think there is any one way to achieve sustainable development. There are multiple pathways. You've just heard the Poverty Environment Initiative. You've heard 8 or 10 different ones here. And so the clear message that's coming out is that there are many pathways to sustainable development. And there is absolutely no doubt in our minds about this. I'm not going to summarize each of those, what people have said, although we do have a summary and we can share it with you later. But just in the interest of time, and because I know that people would like to catch a drink if the drinks are still going on, I'm just going to make some few points that have emerged from this discussion. One, that you have a very clear, no cookie cutter, no one size fits all. We started with that, we end with that, because that's obvious. But while each approach is unique, we know that sustainable development that we've been hearing, the pathways to which are very clearly telling us that we want to move away from an economic growth which is just about economic growth in the traditional sense. And so people are more and more talking of happiness, of human well-being, of social equity, of sustainable consumption, and of the importance of environment health, which is one of the overarching themes of even this UNEA. So what is it that we hear again and again and again from everybody who spoke today? Hello, the paradigm in which we are working as economic growth is not holding up. We need something else. We need something which speaks to the various different domains, social and environment. But each of us has a different way of going to it. And, we support all of them. They're not mutually exclusive. They complement each other. And the purpose of having workshops like this, the purpose of the work that China has been supporting us in the South-South cooperation as well as in sharing all these perspectives, is to see how we can improve from learning from each other. I was just speaking to Ivy on this inclusive green economy that we have, and she says, why another one? Another one in the sense that we had a green economy model, and we had some feedback which said this had to be improved, that had to be improved in terms of redistribution, in terms of consumption. The investment parts, the production parts were fine, but the others needed to be improved. And so we at UNEP wanted to, explore how the narrative could gain from reading around this. And because we'd been doing this report, because we'd been doing the study, Phula and the team were in a position to, I think, revisit some of the narratives. This is not to say that this is better than that or that is better than this. All these are pathways. It's a context within which our countries are that will determine where and what pathway we want to develop. So China has ecological civilization, Bolivia has living well, and who knows, India may come up with its own strategy. It doesn't have one yet on this issue. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take up any more time. I just want to say that we hope that this workshop, helps us to keep talking about the alternatives that are available and to keep improving on the alternatives, because no one has found a completely perfect way yet. But having said that, thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the panelists for all the support and for the energy that you have showed. And above all, thank you to China for the support for this workshop and for all the work that's gone behind this. Thank you very much.